Welcome to today's rant. And who am I talking about when I say finally he takes a stand? I'm talking about our Attorney General, who has been AWOL for the entire term, it seems. Shockingly absent, not engaged in some of the ultimate and most critical issues, I think, going on today. But he finally took a stand, in the right one, even though it was kind of tepid and weak. He at least took a stand saying that these decisions by these judges to impose their own laws and their own interpretation of executive orders is unconstitutional. No question it is. These judges, to me, Sessions' response was, this is a violation of the wisdom of our founding fathers. No, it's unconstitutional for these judges to do that. The Constitution is clear that the foreign policy of our country is in the domain of the executive branch alone. And it's critical that this be the case. You cannot have three different branches of government all having their own foreign policy. And that's what these activist judges have been trying to do. They should be impeached and disbarred for their decisions. And I'm serious, but we don't have a attorney general with the courage, it seems, to stand up even for our own Constitution, and that's what he took an oath of office to defend. The Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Guess what? The Supreme Court is not the supreme law of the land. I think they were misnamed and should have been called the higher court or the highest court, because they were intended to be the highest court of appeal. But they were never in our Constitution. Go read it yourself. Find one place that the Supreme Court is given the authority to even determine what is constitutional or not. But, we have become such a legalistic society, so dominated by legalism and by lawyers, that everyone thinks in terms, well, they're lawyers, they're judges, who else to judge these things? There was a reason why the founding fathers didn't want them judging such things. Because of what has happened to our country, what Thomas Jefferson called judicial tyranny. It's actually gone beyond judicial tyranny. But he and the other founding fathers considered that the greatest threat to our republic, and it has. By these judges assuming the authority given to the other branches of government, like the executive branch or the legislative branch, by legislating from the bench, making up laws from the bench. When some of these judges ruled to suspend executive orders concerning immigration, for example, they had zero authority for doing that under our Constitution. They violated our Constitution. That's a violation. That's a usurping of the executive power of our country, and somebody's got to stand up to them, or it's going to continue to run amok. Now, lately, I think the Supreme Court, some of their decisions have been leaning towards the same thing. When they verify the president has the authority to make those decisions, immigration comes under foreign policy. And he alone has the authority there. They do not have the authority to disagree with executive orders, much less to suspend them. They can disagree with them personally or anything, but they cannot do anything about them. They do not have that authority. Well, who does? It was given to the executive branch because he will be accountable to the people and will be accountable, but you can't have the other branches of government constantly, now they can second guess, they can disagree, be public, be vocal, but they do not have the authority to issue orders to stop an executive order, a lawful executive order of the president, which anything to do with immigration is a lawful executive order. Now, we also have laws that the president and the courts and everybody has sworn to uphold the laws of the land. And Obama overturning a law that was passed by Congress with his executive orders, that's an illegal use of executive order. Now, the executive orders are given to carry out, to give orders to the executive branch of government to do their job as the president, who is our leader, determines. Within his authority, the president has overstepped his bounds before. I think Obama did it many times, but almost every president has. And most of the problems we have right now, including the great division in our country, though, I think almost all of the division in our country you can trace back is rooted to the judicial branch, either legislating from the bench or assuming authority our Constitution does not give to them. For example, most of the major decision in our country for things like abortion, the Constitution is clear. Whatever authority was not specifically given to the federal government in the Constitution is remanded to the states and to the people. Nowhere is authority over any social issue, marriage, whether gay marriage or anything about marriage or any other thing about social or morals or things like that. Nowhere is this given to the federal government in our Constitution. It was an assumed authority. So they took authority, made some decisions that has created increasing division within our country, and it's going to keep on increasing until it gets out of hand if somebody doesn't stand up to this judicial tyranny. Now, the way social issues were intended to be worked out in our country, okay, states had the authority to address this. And throughout history, they have. But things concerning things, whether abortion or gay marriage, all these things were intended to remain with the state, so every state could determine what they wanted to do. Yes, that many states would choose to have legal abortion, gay marriage, all this other, but that's their choice. That is at least constitutional. And they're going to have to deal with their own voters on a local basis, but also some of these things get tried and tested within the states, and other states may learn from the experience that, hey, we don't want to go there, or they could learn, yes, we do. This really works. We need to do this for our people. But those kinds of things were intended to be worked out by the states or by the people. And doing it that way takes all of the social pressure that's been building up by our federal U.S. Supreme Court imposing the law on the entire country because of its views of these things. Now, it can be turned back. And our Supreme Court has made some terrible decisions in its history. It's had to remand. It's had to go back and undo. For instance, the most famous probably being Dred Scott, where slaves were determined to be property and not human beings, not people. That was a Supreme Court decision. The Supreme Court gets it wrong a lot of the time. That's why they were never given the authority. This was something that the Founding Fathers gave to the legislative branch of government because they knew the legislative branch would be the most responsive to the people because they get elected every 2 years or every 6 years. And that this is something that if they do something wrong, they're going to pay the price. It's going to be dealt with at the ballot box, and it's going to get fixed by the people. That's mostly what the government was supposed to be, by the people. And you take remember Proposition 8 in California? That's the way things like gay marriage should have been dealt with. And California surprisingly voted that they did not want to allow gay marriage. Now, they could have voted to allow it, but they chose not to allow gay marriage. Well, one federal judge who turned out to be gay himself with a partner, obviously he wanted to marry or have a recognized marriage with, one judge, without any authority to do so, one federal judge overturned the will of millions of Californians who had voted, say, no, we don't want this. That is one of the most blatant examples of judicial tyranny, and in a way that has created tremendous cultural upheaval in our country is completely unnecessary. I tell you, the rising divisions in our country can be laid at the feet of our U.S. Supreme Court to a major degree. I think we're, I've said before, I think we're called to be a nation divided. I think we're called to have divisions, but have a process for working them out. That's not a process for working out where one judge somewhere, because of his own personal issues, he's going to make the law for the entire state or sometimes the entire country. It's crazy. That's judicial tyranny. That is tyranny. That's dictatorship by our judicial. What the founding fathers feared the most. But what should happen is these things, we should be able to have a nation to be divided on things, but where there's civil and open discourse, where these things are processed and worked out. But any major decision coming down from our Supreme Court in the areas where it has no authority to make these decisions, it exacerbates the divisions and makes it almost impossible to resolve them. And its ultimate result, if not checked at this time, if Attorney General Sessions doesn't get much more bold in addressing this, and our Congress has a leadership raised up that will address these issues and start impeaching judges who do such things, which the Congress alone has the power to impeach. They should be impeaching these judges, or they should be doing what they were given the power of the purse to, just cut them off. The only court mandated by our Constitution is the Supreme Court. All other courts, all other levels of federal court are mandated by the Congress. And all they have to do is cut off funding to any one of them or just shut them down. When they get so out of whack with the Constitution, somebody's got to do that. Or it's going to get increasingly bitter and increasingly violent. But if it's remanded to the states, it's brought back to a local area. It's neighbors talking to neighbors. It's people where there needs to be discourse, and all discourse, these issues are going to be heated at times, but they don't have to get violent. The way it makes it almost no other alternative than to become violent when you have tyranny on any level. And right now, the greatest threat to our country is the judicial tyranny of these judges. I'm just saying, bless their hearts. Thank you for joining me for today's rant.